Okay, well, Jim was pretty easy on the FDA, I think, and so here's your chance to put a more balanced view, maybe.
So I wanted to ask about combination device, because many of the pharmaceutical that are brought to market, biologics and so on, requires also delivery devices with them. So where does it end? CDRH or as an IND or both? Or how does this process work harmoniously?
Okay, well, I have a few words on that, but then I'll let Tina and Lynn take over. I think one area where that's very relevant is in microbubbles. I think traditionally that the Center for Drugs has automatically had the lead in microbubble technologies, and that's changing now. We have an Office of Combination Products that will make the decision on whether that should be a CDER lead or a CDRH lead. So things are evolving in that area. Tina, Lynn, what would you like to?
Yeah, so we do have an Office of Combination Products at FDA, and they will determine the lead center that will take the review and ultimate marketing pathway. But sometimes early in development, when you're in the clinical trial phase, it's hard to say exactly what the ultimate marketing pathway will be. So they will initially assign a lead center to review the IDE, or IND, but we all work together as a team. So all the centers will be involved in the review of your submission.
Just one little point. If it's a new drug and using a device in an investigational way, so there would be an IND and technically an IDE, determining which center is priority, you don't have to do both an IND and an IDE. So if it's under an IND protocol, we'll get involved from the device side, but you don't need an independent IDE. We'll review the safety and effectiveness of the combination, which will allow the investigational device application to be done simultaneously. So that's a little bit of a help. There's not two submissions, there's just one submission. I'm sorry, again?
He's asking if the device.
And if it is an existing drug and a new device.
Yeah, we usually get input from CDER. If it's already been an approved drug and it's being used with a novel device, we'll get input, but that generally goes under an IDE.
Okay.
I actually wanted to support what Jim said. It's not that he's being nice on them, I don't think. I've done 2 investigator-initiated IDEs with help from support staff at our university. And it's actually a very collaborative interaction with the FDA. So for people in the audience that are interested and willing in pursuing that, I found that they're actually trying to help you get your protocol right. It's rigorous and it can be time-consuming, but at the end of the day, I think that protocol ends up being better. Where I find frustration myself and then also my patients is when I have to explain to them that FDA approval doesn't mean reimbursement. And that disconnect is a significant challenge. And I wonder, obviously I realize the agenda of the two, let's say CMS versus FDA are 2 different priorities, let's say. But do the people within FDA have any comments to make about how to bridge that gap and or to at least narrow the time that it takes to go from regulatory approval? It doesn't make sense to a patient to say that the FDA has said this is safe and effective, but your insurance company still won't pay for it.
So if that is an issue, I think in part of the study, CMS can actually join the discussions. We've invited payers to the table as part of reviews even for investigational applications. So if it's really like that novel and the reimbursement question is an important one, it can be discussed, and CDRH would work closely with the colleagues as they see fit to bring those kinds of questions early in the discussions as well. We have done that before.
I think the other thing to consider when you look at why the insurance companies will not reimburse, it's generally because they don't believe that the novel or new therapeutic is better than the existing. And one way I think prospectively that you can try to overcome that hurdle is, rather than designing a non-inferiority trial, to design a superiority trial. And therefore, at the outcome of your data, you show that you're better than your comparator, not non-inferior to your comparator, then you might have a stronger argument when it comes to the reimbursement issues. It's just a thought.
I also wanted to, just something you made me think of when you mentioned clinical studies and even investigator studies, something that I share with a number of colleagues that I get to interact with internationally. Many times there's this idea that I'm going to collect data in other marketplaces and then come to the US after. For example, maybe I'll get EU CE mark first, and then I'll come to the US. And I would actually say that we would be interested in engaging with you if you are going to collect data outside of the US and decide not to do your study in the US, to come to FDA and share your protocol, your clinical protocol, before you initiate that study, because there have been a number of cases where FDA has reviewed and made comments on that clinical protocol, and if they do that before you initiate the study, then there's a higher likelihood that when those clinical data are then submitted in your marketing application in the US, we would accept those data. So if you can get input from FDA on your protocol before you do your study in another country, you're going to have a lot greater success than doing your study first and then coming to the FDA later. So your comment made me think about that as well.
So I was thinking about what Yoa was talking about with the combination products, and obviously with things like that, or with other new kind of mechanisms of focused ultrasound, still, we understand you have to do the pre-submissions and talk about maybe specific applications with the companies. But are there ways that we can work together as a community as these new mechanisms of action are coming about, be it histotripsy or opening the blood-brain barrier or neuromodulation, where the community can get a better understanding of maybe the types of preclinical studies that are going to be required in those types of new mechanism of action applications, or things like that, and maybe the OSL people that are in the ultrasound group can speak to what you are doing in some of those new mechanism areas of action in terms of standards development and things like that that could apply for the whole community.
Yeah, I'll say, and I'm really happy that Tina gave out contact information for the group. What I'll say from the standpoint of OSL, the FDA has a face, and in terms of ultrasound, it's our group. And so what I would say is, both from the standpoint of industry, not to be afraid to contact us, to speak with us, to take a look at what we consider important. At some point, from the ultrasound standpoint, if something goes in for a submission, it will likely cross one of our desks at some point. And so just having an open dialogue with us, we're very open to collaborating with groups, with academia, certainly with the focused ultrasound group.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that having us involved in the Focused Ultrasound Foundation workshops and symposia is valuable to us. It helps motivate our research, and we're doing research in a lot of areas that we think are going to be important when you submit a couple of years from now. Greg has projects in the microbubble area. Greg and I do. He also has skulls all over our lab. And we're trying to do the things that we think are important to bring your devices to market years down the road. I think we really want to emphasize that this is a collaborative effort, and when we identify the challenges together early on, we can work on them together.
I wanted to also just add, you mentioned standards. So our group, these guys are involved in a number of standards. In addition to that, they're also really involved in developing useful tools that they can put out. And just in the interest of time in the presentation, I didn't get to say too much specifics about that, but we have work, one of our scientists is developing a HIFU simulator, and that code has just been released, and we have another group that's working on tissue mimicking phantoms, and those recipes and things have been published. So in addition to standards, we are putting out a lot of scientific information that's helpful. With respect to your comment comment, though, about, the kinds of studies that would be needed for these new technologies. One of the things that we've done in the area of cardiovascular devices, where I worked for a number of years, is we would actually have focused sessions in our conferences where we would bring together the engineers, the clinicians, and the regulators to talk, like whiteboarding, literally, on, what are the issues that we need to overcome, and how might we as a community look at what are those clinical questions that need to be addressed in a study look like. And I haven't been a part of this meeting in the past, but I would encourage a session like that going forward.
Yeah, and I think it's important because the types of preclinical testing that may be needed is indication dependent. So it's important to contact the management for each of the review offices for the types of testing that they would want to see.
So I would just say that what you said, Tina, would be fantastic, and we have a lot of small workshops, and members of the OSL group are there. But the one negative I would say is that when we get to that point of where we really want to talk about, well, what would be the types of studies that this whole group doing BBB opening or something, what types of studies would they need to get to those clinical trials from the FDA standpoint, we don't hear anything from the FDA. So I don't know if it's because industry is in the room, but maybe we can offline discuss how to better make that interaction work, because we want to facilitate that from the foundation.
Sure, and let's think about how we can leverage some of the successes we've had in other areas and what some of the difficulty might be to say things that might get written down that might come back to us later, and how do we overcome some of those fears that we have.
Yeah, one thing I would say about that, Jessica, is that the field of focused ultrasound is very different than a lot of other areas where the FDA works. So I've worked in cardiovascular before, and when you have a new technology in cardiovascular area, you have the benefit of hundreds of thousands of procedures that have been done in related areas. And so you know what to look for, you know what the potential problems are, but in the area of focused ultrasound, you don't have that kind of database to work from. So we're learning with you, and that's very different from other areas that FDA regulates.
Well, and we really appreciate your participation. We just would like to make things even better. So,
yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
Hi, Mary Lee Jepson. You say come early and talk to you. Sounds good. Then you talk to people that charge you a lot of money to craft your message so that the FDA can digest it. You just said we might write things down that might come back. I'm going to misquote you, come back to haunt you. Mm-hmm. How do we open, given the concern of coming too early, telling you exactly what we're doing, getting hit with a ton of work, boy, and then this record that haunts you forever, how do you figure out exactly when to come? Because I think there might be something as it may be too early in a lot of cases for work that we're doing, and when is the right time?
So from my perspective, I would say that it's not too early, because imagine the scenario. Let's play these two scenarios out. Let's play the scenario that I'm a company and I invest a lot of technology. I hire a lot of consultants to do the research for me on what the regulatory questions might be. And I go along that pathway, and time has evolved. Maybe it's a couple years, and now I come to FDA and I present this finished technology with all this testing that was done and expect that I did my homework. It should be a slam dunk. But a lot of times it's not, because over those couple years, a lot of things has changed.
So the flip side is, a startup starts with, I've done it 4 times, me in a bathrobe with a cup of coffee. Am I really supposed to go to the FDA at that point? Then I build a lab, I get a dozen people. I haven't done testing yet. We got these prototypes. We haven't decided actually the specs we're going to do for the first product. Is that too early? I mean,
so
it's
I would
not
say,
after 3
sure.
years of testing and $100 million. Should you do it after $1 million, $10 million? Where is the right point? Because I think there is too early. Me in the bathrobe with a cup of coffee is a waste of your time. Total waste of your time, I'm sure of that.
So I would say in some cases maybe, but even on the scientific front, that you come in, one of the pre-subs in the program is called an informational meeting, where the idea is just to introduce a concept or a technology to FDA without any binding feedback from either parties. And the idea is that if FDA is in the dark about a technology that's coming and you come in and highlight that for us, that gives us a chance to learn and to catch up with where you are instead of 2 or 3 years later when we have to play that catch up in a shorter time. So that's one of the concepts
But
behind.
I have no employees yet, so I'm spending my time flying to Washington all day. So like really,
Sure.
like literally, like I
Yeah,
get
go
that
ahead,
you
Lynn.
want to know what Everett is doing to write it down, but like I think there must be too early. And
Yeah.
that's what all of the consultants that charge a lot to meet you all say.
I mean, from the review group perspective, the basic information we need is to understand what your device concept or design is, who you're targeting, what the patient population will be for this therapeutic, and then we need to understand what would be the risks of the device. And from that information, then we can provide feedback on these are the
Totally get it. So
the
when you
testing.
decide what your device is when you talk to you, not when you're in
Exactly.
R&D. Okay.
Right.
That's
I think we
that-
need to understand how the device will be designed because that will base what the risk mitigations will be and the testing that will be needed from the FDA perspective when you demonstrate safety and effectiveness.
Sorry, I'm taking too much time, but
It's okay.
I'm not getting, anyway. When you decide what a device is and you have a go-to-market plan, may be the right time.
Yeah, and I really recommend that you engage with the contacts that we listed on the slides because you can send a simple email to any of the managers just to ask, how should I approach FDA? Am I ready to come in? And you can send an email to any of us and we'll
You
respond.
have no idea how scared people are of you, so like there's this
So I wanna
trust
add
us,
that-
but there's still this, maybe it's the old regime, but there's still this fear of you.
You did say something important about R&D, and we did talk about 6 scientists that work in medical ultrasound. So if you actually have a scientific question about what you're pursuing and what might be some ways to do that, which is why we broke up, regulatory science into regulatory review, that you can engage with us separately from the regulatory review, and we would avoid the regulatory pathway questions if it's truly about scientific things and what might tests or standards I use to evaluate this. That group is there to answer those questions as well. So
Thank you.
thanks for your good question.
Yeah, hi, I'm Andreas from Europe, so I would like to express my appreciation how FDA and you approaches the problem of regulatory approval, that you do your own research and all this. But you said just doing studies abroad. Europe is currently getting a new medical device regulation, and it seems that we at least lose 30% of our products due to the requirement of relabeling. And now the common view is that we should in Europe do FDA first. So you may hire more people to get all these overwhelming requests. Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up to my earlier statement. When you guys say that you include CMS in your evaluations, do you also include the MACs? Because what we found, the actual regional Medicare contractors, so what we found is that CMS will give a code and assign a value, but then each regional Medicare administrator will apply its own set of criteria, saying, I want 2-year data, I want 3-year data. Sure. And on top of whatever you and CMS has already said. So I wonder whether it's worthwhile to include some of the key set of MACs in that conversation as well at the beginning, if you're already including CMS.
Sure,
are you doing that now?
I know that there have been conversations with different private payers. I'm not sure if those are the same folks.
No,
okay.
no, it's
So
the
I'm
regional
personally
people
not
that,
aware,
that
but
manage Medicare for, let's say, California. They impose another set of restrictions.
okay, we can communicate that back. Thank you.
Well, I'm told I have to cut off the discussion, but we'll be around for the rest of the morning, and we'll be happy to talk to you offline. Okay. Thank you very much.